President Trump calling the New York Times report that Russia offered bounties to Taliban fighters to kill American soldiers a hoax. This coming as Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says that Russians engaged in Afghanistan is, quote, nothing new. Joining me now is to discuss all this, Pennsylvania Representative Guy Reschenthaler. He serves on a House subcommittee on international terrorism, and we are pleased to have him. Congressman, good to see you again. Thanks for being here.
David, thanks for having me on, David.
Let's be specific about what I think the president is referring to as a hoax. It's not necessarily the story of Russia involvement in Afghanistan with the Taliban. It's that he was briefed. This is what the original story said, that he was briefed about the story and refused to do anything about it. I think that's what he's referring to as the hoax of the story. Do you agree?
I believe he's referring to that and the fact that this was written on, or from what we're being told, this was written on his briefing, but he was being verbally briefed, and the briefer never articulated that talking point. So the president actually did not receive that information. So I think that's what the president is talking about. But
in fact, by the way,
yes.
Forgive me for interrupting, but a CIA officer who's not named for obvious reasons confirmed that the president was not briefed because there wasn't enough validating information for that particular briefing, correct?
Yes, well, I was going to say the information before it gets to the president has got to be vetted, corroborated, and only the evidence that is, or only the material that has evidence before it and those facts get to the president. And again, you can't fault him for the fact that the CIA briefer did not actually brief him on this. But you know what, David, you know who did have actual actionable intelligence on Russia and other actors? That's Biden and Obama, because under the Obama administration, they actually had intel, because it happened that Russia was going to annex part of Ukraine, Crimea, and Obama and Biden did nothing. President Trump, though, sent the Ukrainians Javelin missiles, lethal aid. So that's the difference. And Biden and Obama also knew that there were threats on Benghazi. They sat back and did nothing. They knew that ISIS was running roughshod over Iraq and Syria. They did nothing. Compare that with President Trump, who's taken strong actions. And when we had the chance to take out Soleimani, somebody who has killed American soldiers or orchestrated the death of over 600 Americans, President Trump took out Soleimani. And President Trump took out al-Baghdadi with ISIS. So President Trump's record is incredible on these issues. Right. So if Biden wants to pick this fight and have an argument over who's tougher on national security and national defense, we'll take that any day, because President Trump will win that argument any day.
Well, President Trump also took out several hundred Russian mercenaries who were working in Syria. Yes. President Trump also has been quite critical of the Russian pipeline to Germany. All sorts of things that the Russians consider valuable to them have been interfered with by President Trump himself. So this is all an attempt to resurrect that failed attempt of pointing to collusion between Vladimir Putin and President Trump, first to win the election and then throughout the first term of his presidency. That is a failed premise, and it's one that is simply not supported by the evidence.
Well, David, we read this book before, and you talked about the talk about Russian collusion. It was absolutely, just absolutely a work of fiction. You know, I've read this book before. It's a low-level bureaucrat who doesn't work through the chain of command, takes evidence that's not validated, and turns around and gives it to the New York Times or the Washington Post to make the president look bad. And it's incredibly too politically convenient that this is coming out now. To me, this smacks of what we've seen before, an attempt to damage this administration with something that's just utterly false. But again, the president's actions speak for themselves. You know, I'm old enough to remember President Obama telling Mitt Romney that the 1980s wanted his foreign policy back, when Mitt Romney was warning everybody about Russia. So I trust President Trump much more than I do Biden on Russia and who's going to hold Russia accountable for their nefarious actions across the world.
And by the way, we should mention, you served time in Iraq as a JAG officer, so you care about what happens in that region, care about what happens to our troops in that region. I just want to talk about something that is of great import to Americans right now with the COVID problem still hanging over all of our heads. That is another stimulus package. The president spoke about that as well today with Blake Berman. Let me play that soundbite and get your response. Go ahead, roll tape.
Another round of direct payments for individuals. Do you support that at this time?
I do. I support it, but it has to be done properly. And I support actually larger numbers than the Democrats, but it's got to be done properly.
Now, the main problem that a lot of people have with these payouts, particularly the federal addition to unemployment checks, which is about $600, and that can bring up your unemployment check to a lot more than you were actually making. In fact, it's true for a lot of the people that are getting, particularly in states like New York, where now they're getting over $1,000 a week in unemployment checks. Isn't that a disincentive to go back to work?
Yes, David, the extra $600 a week on top of unemployment compensation, although it was well-intentioned, it's actually causing a lag in getting this economy roaring again. So I don't want to begrudge anybody money, but paying $600 extra is doing two things. It's forcing people to make the economic choice to stay home and not to go back to work, or it's causing these small businesses to increase wages, which hurts them even more when they're paying an inflated wage to individuals. I don't want to begrudge anybody money, but now's the time that we're smart about this. We got to bring the economy back online, and we do that by reducing taxation, by reducing regulation, by reducing burdens on small business. That's how we're going to get the V-shaped recovery.
By the way, very quickly, we're running out of time, but the Senate passed an extension of the Paycheck Protection Program deadline because there's still quite a bit of money left in that has been passed. Will the House approve that extension?
I believe that passed today unanimously, but we need, yes, I believe that passed today unanimously, and we have to give people and businesses the time to take advantage of the successful PPP and EIDL loan and grant programs, of course.
And that will bring people back to work and get the economy, get the GDP moving again. Congressman Reschenthaler, have a wonderful July 4th celebration. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, David. Take care.